What's going on, everybody? My name is Branson Brooks. I am a writer for the DC Voice, and I'm here with Commissioner Williams, Commissioner for Ward 8, representing the residents of Congress Heights. Thank you for being here with me today, Commissioner Williams.
Thanks for having me, Branson.
Yes, sir. So, first off, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and just some of your daily happenings?
Well, I'm a Ward 8 resident. As you mentioned, I'm the ANC Commissioner and Chair of ANC 8E. Um, I have been chair now for in my second term, and I've worked on the DC City Council under Vincent Orange, Councilman at Large Vincent Orange, as well as when he departed briefly under Chairman Mendelson. I've been in government about 25 years, working at the White House, working at the state legislature, DC Council, and now ANC Commissioner. I think probably the thing that's most important to me as a commissioner is folks in housing and their housing availability and affordability, as well as homelessness. Folks suffering from homelessness.
So, can you just talk about some of your recent demonstrations you've been involved in and why you felt they were so important?
Um, I feel it's so important because housing, I think, should be a right, not a choice. I think that when you have abject poverty and you have poverty, isolated and systemic in certain parts of the city or certain communities, you're creating a boilerplate for crime. You're creating a boilerplate for homelessness. You're creating a um, area or a systemic cycle of continued health disparities, educational disparities, all the disparities that we, talk about we want to combat, but we haven't done a good job at doing that because we're using the same blueprints rather than thinking outside of the box and doing something different. I think being able to have access to opportunities or just access to resources is very important. And so, becoming a commissioner, running for office, running for Congress, and working through the federal government, working in all levels of government that I have, I believe gives me some insight and understanding that we have to learn how to do things with more common sense rather than bureaucratic sense. Some things just don't make sense bureaucratically. And that's why we're always stuck in this cycle because we've decided that there's only one way to do it. And I believe that when you do things with some innovation and some, experience, some life experience, I was homeless in the city. So I understand firsthand what it means, what the struggles are, what the traumas are, what the health impact and mental health impacts are. I understand what the difficulty of trying to navigate through the governmental bureaucracy of trying to identify and find housing, and especially for single fathers. I was a homeless single father where there are no shelters, there were no services, there were no opportunities or applications to be able to complete or fill out for single fathers at that time. And so right now I'm dealing with issues with landlords that have displaced their tenants because they have an electrical issue. They gave them a week to determine if they had to move out. They're going to put them in a hotel, but you're doing this right after the first of the month. So folks who have gone out and bought their groceries, they've put their groceries in the freezer and they're going to a hotel and they're being told, well, take your food with you. Well, hotels don't have freezers and refrigerators to put their food in. And then when the tenants get to the hotel, they're told that they have to pay a $500 security deposit. Well, that's not for them to pay. That's for the landlord to pay. That shouldn't be something where I'm getting 10 or 15 phone calls at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon when they've been told they have to leave their apartment and check into a hotel. I shouldn't be getting those phone calls. Everything should have already been taken place by the landlord, and they should have not had to worry about anything. No tenant should have had to worry about anything. They're already stressed enough that they have to move out. They're stressed enough because they may possibly lose their food that they just spent maybe $300 or $400 on, right? They may have had food stamps and they would have paid with food stamps, or they used their cash and they pay with cash. Whatever mechanism they paid with, that food is now in jeopardy of being lost. And now they're coming back, and the landlord says, well, we're not reimbursing you, we're not paying you for this. So just common sense things are impactful. And I think that we need to change the way we think about how we treat people. We have to understand that people are not resources for ourselves and our own benefits as landlords because you're getting that money from them. But people are people. And if you treat them right, they're likely to treat you right and your property right. Statistics show that if you concentrate poverty in one area, you're going to continue that and crime is going to go up. But if that poverty is mixed in with working class, middle class, then that poverty now dissipates because those individuals who were below the poverty level find ways to be able to, migrate up into other areas because they see something. The old adage, if I see an example that I can follow, I'm able to follow that. If I'm in a concentrated poverty area and all I see is poverty, there are no examples for me to follow. So I'm able to move out and go into different directions. And if we're able to do that, we can reduce crime because crime is a product of poverty. It's not always a product of just someone wanting to steal or someone wanting to carjack. It's about trying to get access and resource. You can't tell someone who's getting $300 or $400 a night, going out there committing a stupid crime that they may die from, go get a $10 an hour job. You can't tell them that. They're not going to do it. They're going to follow the examples that they have. And unfortunately, those examples aren't good examples. And those examples create crime. Those examples create death. Those examples create all the disparities that we come up with in our communities that we need to be able to recognize and understand. We have to provide for our community, provide for our residents, provide for our citizens so that folks can elevate themselves and not always depreciate themselves and just accept what they're given, but strive for what they can take and garner.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was definitely a great perspective, especially with the recent passing of policy that kind of focused more of what happened after some of these, especially people in the young community, commit these crimes rather than why these people in the young community commit these crimes. And the fact that you touched on things like homelessness and really the educational system, what I feel are really some key points in the really putting a good basis in the young person's life. I really think those were great points to really add to that subject. So
You have to do that. If I'm in school, if I'm in sixth grade, seventh grade, and I'm in a community that all I've seen is gun violence,
yes, sir.
all I've had is robbing and stealing. All I've seen is people taking from one another or talking or laughing about it, joking about it because it's fun, it's cute, or what have you. Then that's what I'm going to aspire to do.
Yes, sir.
But if I can see in my classroom, if I can see through my education, if I can see and I'm being taught that, hey, I can aspire to be an air traffic controller by learning how to fly drones. If I can see that I can be a cybersecurity person because I can get free training and go out there and become a cybersecurity person, or if I can see how I can be a court reporter, right? And I can go into the courtrooms and I can take notes and I can do different things. And all of those aspects only require me to graduate from high school. I don't have to go to college to do that. And I can make six figures. I can make $100,000. I can aspire for that. I can see that. And if our classrooms can turn into opportunity rooms as opposed to just teaching to take a test, but we can teach you for life, then you can change the community and perspective of the individuals in the classroom, the teachers teaching the children, the parents parenting the kids, and now that child is no longer can be influenced by their peers because their peers are learning and understanding the same thing. So now they can all have the same vision and they can go out there and compete for that vision rather than competing for who's going to be best on the corner or who's going to get the best car or who's going to get the best, um, fight or whatever they're going to get into. Now you're creating a different mindset and mentality for them to actually strive to be law abiding, tax paying, homeowners, family driven, head of households to go out there and create families instead of creating chaos.
Yeah, so it's really just about creating that community to make like-minded individuals to try to push to that goal of just being a better individual.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I definitely understand that. Definitely understand that. And so I really wanted to ask that you kind of talked about your daily happenings and some of the stuff you demonstrate. What do you feel is really the main role of an ANC commissioner?
The main role as the ANC commissioner is to be that liaison, that advocate, that resource for the community when they cannot and aren't able to get to the council. We are that liaison as the grassroots, as I call it, the bare bones, the boots on the ground for the community residents. Because the calls that I get for like the tenants who are going through the situation that they have to leave out of their apartments, they're not going to call the city council for that. And if they do call the city council for that, they may get a response, but they may not get the response they want. They may not get the action that they want, and it may not reach them. So we are that first line of defense, if you will, or that first line of contact or communication to not only empower them and help them understand what's happening on the council and what legislation or what things are going on that may impact them or concern them. But we're also that resource for them when they call us and contact us and say, "Hey, this is what's going on in my community," or there's a you know abandoned car. There's, the tenants, the landlord is doing this and not, following the law. There's being, my neighbor's building an addition onto his house and he didn't go get permits. Whatever it could be, we're that first line of defense, that first line of communication, that first line of resources to the residents of the district so that they can access their government but also access the resources, the information, and the services that they need from their government.
Okay. So would you say you talked about your that first line of communication? How would you say you stay informed on those current events and issues affecting the city and relay them to the citizens? Do you feel like you're more of a hands-on person who gets like to get out in the community and talk to them on a more face-to-face notice, or just how is your day-to-day on that?
It depends. I am that because I'll get the phone calls and they'll say, "Hey, there's a shooting over here just happened." So I'll get in my car, I'll run over to the spot wherever that may be, and I'll sit there and I'll try to talk to the residents. I'll talk to the police officers. I'll try to get some information, see what's going on. Try to inform the community. Try to reach back out. You know, maybe post on something on Twitter or something of that nature. Um, Other cases, I try to be that hands-on person where if they call me, I try to call the agency, the entity, or whoever may be in need for them. I may not. Naturally, I don't have all the answers and I may not have all the solutions. So I have to be the resource to be able to find those answers, find those solutions for them and guide them and direct them in the right pathway. Um, my day to day is it depends. It varies. So it could be a day where I'm doing my own work and my own business and running around, or I could be doing ANC commissioner work all day long. Um, we were preparing for our meeting for Monday, so I'm talking to uh, different agencies about coming to present at our ANC meeting and talking to them about different issues in our community. I think yesterday I had a meeting with a developer at one of our schools, early learning schools, in the ANC because they're going to be building some houses behind the school. So we had to bring the developer in and get with the school leadership, talk about how that's going to impact the school day-to-day function. They're going to be tearing up the alleyway where parents are going to be driving in. How is that going to impact their ability to get to school on time? How's the debris and the digging and the jackhammering going to impact the children when they're sleeping in the afternoon? How is the construction and all the people being there at a particular time? How's that going to impact the kids when they're outside playing? I had to call this meeting because although at one point the development had been approved, I realized that all the stakeholders in the community had not been contacted as previously represented. So I had to rescind the approval of the development and then go back to the community and ask the community to give us more input, because what was presented to us as having community input, we found out, well, there wasn't all community input, and this school, which is right next to the development, was never contacted. So that was a problem for me.
Yeah.
So after the commission had actually voted to approve the development, we then rescinded our vote and said we don't approve of it because we need to make sure that this stakeholder is taken into consideration, especially since they are a longstanding value to the community, a longstanding and they have longstanding impact in the community, especially for the development of our children and our youth and young adults. We want to make sure that their concerns are considered and that their concerns are addressed before shovel gets into the ground. So we then had that meeting yesterday and convened that to where we were able to come to some agreement, come to some reconciliations, and now those two groups are going to get together again, meet again, and discuss, the final aspects of that before it comes back before the commission before we vote on it. So the day is, as they say, it's a box of chocolates. Every day is going to be different. You never know what you're going to get. So the day to day can be peaceful. It can be, vigorous. It can be active. There's a number of different ways the day can go. Community, I'm trying to impact my community, and I'm trying to, not just educate them, empower them, enlighten them, but certainly, help them, move forward, grow in their aspects, grow in their aspirations, and give them some inspiration of what our community, our city, our individually, what we can be.
That makes a lot of sense. And you talked about really wanting to because you talked about the school, really, you had a problem with the school not knowing about the people who were building behind their school, and you had a problem with them not being let know that was happening before. Do you feel that's kind of like a key message going into your campaign, especially with a lot of manufacturing and building going around in DC, that you would like the people in those areas to know and have a say in that manufacturing?
Absolutely. I think what you find, again, it's unfortunate, but there's a certain reality that a lot of um, lack of information is uh, centralized in lower income, impoverished Black and Brown communities. And so there have been, in my opinion, and just through data records, there's been a lot of instances where Ward 8 has been treated uh, poorly in terms of developers and development coming in and just doing things that they want to do because they've been able to do it and get away with it for so long. And in certain cases, they may not get all the permitting done properly because no one's doing the checks and balances. They may not do the information sessions with the community because they feel like I'm building an apartment building that's to your benefit because I'm going to provide housing. But the reality of it is, it's to that builder's benefit because they're going to be collecting the income from that in perpetuity. So, granted, sure, you're providing a housing for the community, but in some cases, the community has housing. You're going to move from that housing to your housing. But regardless of that, you're benefiting from that because you have an opportunity now to get the resources from that community. And people are resources. When it comes to housing and apartments and building development, we as the community are the resources. So if you look at other wards across the city, there are jobs, there different types of opportunities, restaurants, and the gamut from CVS's to multiple grocery stores to entertainment centers to movie theaters to job centers, office buildings, and things of that nature that are in other wards outside of Ward 8. But we don't have a whole lot of. We have two sit down restaurants in Ward 8. Now that we've extended Ward 8 across the river over by Nat Stadium, there's a few more restaurants that we have access to, quote unquote, in Ward 8. But prior to redistricting, you didn't have that. You had none or just one. We have one grocery store east of the river, the Giant. They're trying to close that down because of theft and things of that nature. So you're fighting to keep that open. You have I think, a feeling that, well, that's the poor community. We're doing a benefit and a service to them. So we're going to do whatever we want to do that. And my position is, no, you're not. You're going to do what you're supposed to do, the way you're supposed to do it. And you're going to respect the people in the community, regardless of their income situation, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of their education, regardless of any other factor. They are human, they're American, they're citizens, taxpayers, or even if their income isn't enough for them to pay taxes, you need to respect them. And as long as I'm chairperson, as long as I'm commissioner and preferably congressional representative, I'm going to make sure you do it. I'm not going to let anyone come in and just step on or step over what I call my people. And I don't mean that just from a racial standpoint. I mean from a community standpoint. You're not going to come into my community, into my ANC or our commission, and just do what you want to do. The old way of doing business is over. There's a new way that we're going to do business. Um, um, an old Eddie Murphy movie used to say, there's a new sheriff in town. So yeah, there's a new sheriff in town. So you either follow the rules and the protocol, or you go somewhere else and build. But you're not going to do it here.
Yeah, I definitely recognize with that, especially with me being so close to Howard University and them building so much stuff around the area, especially them even just tearing down our Halo Garden, which is our campus little brewery, and that was
Right.
any of our consent. So I really kind of feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
So just to get into kind of a more personal note, just to close out, I actually saw that you were originally from California and attended California State University. And it's kind of interesting because I actually went to high school in California, well, in Thousand Oaks. So how did you
Okay.
end up in DC, and what are some similarities you have been able to see between DC and California, especially being so entrenched in the DC community now?
What brought me to DC was a work job. I worked for Willie Brown in California at the time, and I was running President Clinton's campaign in Northern California. And after being able to win the races that I was responsible for, I had like 9 races that I had. I had, I think, 2 congressional races, his presidential race, and a number of state elections that I was managing. And after winning those in 92 and 96, I got an offer to come to DC and work in the White House and work in the administration, which I initially turned down in 90. After 92, I turned it down. They came back in 96, offered it to me again. I turned it down a third time. And then finally, after coming back here, visiting, seeing the people, meeting the people, I accepted the appointment. And that was in 96. And I fell in love with the city. I literally spent probably my first year um, taking the metro around. I didn't drive in the city. And then I would go to the Library of Congress. I would just go to the Library of Congress and read about our history, our nation's history. And I would go to the museums. And I realized that if every individual, but then especially every student here in the district, had an opportunity where they could literally spend weeks at the Library of Congress, I believed that it would change the perspective and the mindset of many of our youth, especially youth in our community, African American community, of recognizing um, the vitality, the enrichment, the power that we as African Americans have in this country. Uh, and that's a caveat with some realities of the fact that America hasn't always been nice to us. America didn't treat us right, that our constitution, legislation, and policies were not designed or written for us um, when they were established, because at that point in time, we were property. We were three-fifths of a person. We weren't human. We were property. We were bought and sold. So a lot of things that we do today and a lot of things that occur today and a lot of the issues that we grapple with, from police brutality and issues in housing and redlining and being able to get loans and jobs and affirmative action and interest into colleges and universities, a lot of that is written into laws. A lot of that is policy that, although have never been taken off the books, are still there, just may not be enforced. And there are those areas where I think if we could educate ourselves, if we could understand, we can empower ourselves and recognize how we can navigate through this thing called life. If you think about it from I guess as a maze or a puzzle or even a video game, when you first grab the controllers and you start moving the controllers to play your video game, and you have the two controllers or the two little knobs, and you have what the A, B, or A, X, G, whatever the numbers are, letters, and then you have all these things. Once you start playing it and you're moving around and you're doing what you're doing, you learn how to navigate. You learn how to uh, still look at the screen and hit X or hit Y, or, if you're playing, what is it, Madden, you learn how to do that because you've been able to educate yourself through the mechanisms of the control. We have to learn how to navigate ourselves through the mechanisms of public policy, of government, of politics, of law enforcement, because there is a difference between politics, government, and policy. And most Americans don't know that. And so they categorize everything as politics, when sometimes it's public policy, and it's the effect or the inability of government to actually implement or do what they're supposed to do with the laws or policy that have been enacted or created. And so I was just amazed at DC. And I was just like, wow, this is the nation's capital. This is everything. But sometimes we don't act like the nation's capital. A lot of times we don't feel like the nation's capital. And a lot of times we don't get the respect as the nation's capital. And for me, that is crucial. That's vital. There should be no other um, state, there should be no other territory that should not be any better than Washington, D.C.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I definitely glad to hear your perspective, especially with me having kind of the same one in it. So, well, I would like to say thank you, Commissioner William, for taking the time to speak with me and sharing with the DC Voice audience and readers.
No problem. Thank you for having me.